season 1 was a big hit for the Sci-Fi Channel. You guys are back now. You're returning for season 2. What kind of responses did you guys get to that first season that sort of like drove home what you probably already knew, but like, oh, this is something special. We're going to be able to keep going with this thing.
Well, we set out to write a love letter to the kind of sci-fi shows I grew up with and Jonathan Glasner grew up with, but we didn't know if people would get it. Because there's been so many other kinds of shows, the dark and edgy serialized shows, shows that are very heavily grounded. Would people respond to this? We didn't know. And then this overwhelming response, it just kind of blew our minds. So going into season 2, it was like, all right, well, they're watching. We better up our game this year.
Yeah.
And we tried on every level. We tried to bring up the effects. We tried to bring up the sets.
Yeah.
We brought in a volume, and we started shooting on that. And then we said, all right, well, season 1 was very much kind of disaster of the week. Let's not do that this season. Let's see if we can really mix it up. And so we brought in some bigger sci-fi concepts that we didn't tackle before.
Yeah.
And I think people are going to be very surprised where this season goes.
I mean, you can tell just from the trailer of season 2 that the effects have been brought up. Did you guys have fans have noticed this? Did you guys have a higher budget? Did you have more sort of resources?
We don't have a higher budget, but I think everybody involved, from the compositors to the digital effects artists to the designers, everybody felt like this responsibility. So it's all like, all right, we ought to just figure it out, and how do we get more for less?
What can you guys tell us about season 2? What can we expect in season 1? The Ark, and we know the way that season ended. The Ark crew is looking for a new home. That last destination went the way of the Death Star. They've got some frenemies on board with them.
Totally.
Maybe
Ship's
friends became
broken.
foes became friends. The streams are crossing. Where are we when season 2 picks up?
I feel like we're at the worst day of Garnett's life. I mean, the ship's broken, some people are dead, and we're now having to rebuild the ship and get back on track to find a planet to inhabit. This season, I don't want to give any spoilers away, so I'm just
you can speak vaguely.
I'm like, oh my God, what do I say? There's just so much unexpected plot twists that I think fans are just gonna love. Like, I literally had so many moments where I would call Reese Ritchie, who plays Lieutenant Lane, and I'd be like, are you kidding me? I can't believe this happens. So I feel like if I'm shocked, I can only imagine what the fans are gonna experience. But yeah, wild things are in store.
Yeah. What can you teach? What can you tease?
I look, very early on in the first episode, they discover there is another destination, and one that may have already begun colonization. They won't know for sure until they get there, and they have to figure out if they can get it. But I think because we set that up so early, it really allows for us to have a much more optimistic show this season. In season 1, all the characters were trying to see, can they become the roles that they were not supposed to do for 10 years? Can they do that immediately? And I think they've survived so many catastrophes that they really are actually comfortable in their roles when season 2 begins. So that allows for a very different dynamic between the characters, and they've bonded. They've bonded as a team now. And before they weren't sure who to trust, who not to trust. Now they're working together, and to see what they can accomplish together is really where the fun of the show is.
I don't know if you guys know this, but fans are a little worried about Angus because we don't see him too much in the trailer. Can you say anything to put their minds at ease?
Well, Angus had big giant pieces of glass sticking out of his chest in the first episode. So
I feel like their concerns are just.
Okay.
We love our sweet little farm boy, but
Yeah.
He's a fan favorite. He's my favorite character too. And Ryan Adams, who plays Angus, is just so funny, so lovely. I'm excited for fans to see where all the characters go. I think people think they know their favorite characters, and this season what Dean Devlin and Jonathan Glasner have done such an amazing job at is flipping all of that on its head. You think you know Garnett, but I don't know if you really do.
The fun thing with Ryan playing Angus is it's his first professional job.
Yeah.
And to watch him as a person, as an actor grow and really take on this position and then get this kind of amazing fan response. It's been a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. Christy, what's been the most rewarding thing about the Ark experience thus far for you?
Honestly, I don't even know how to answer that question, because I feel like the entirety of it, this is my first time leading a TV series, which has been amazing. I'm still Dean, me, really? And seeing the fans' response, people every once in a while will be like, "Hey, Captain." I'm like, "That's me." I'm like, "What?" That's me.
You're the captain now.
I'm the captain now. Which, how many times do I say that to people on a daily basis, as well as deliver an incredible speech? Everywhere I go, people are like, "Can I have a speech?" And I'm like, "No, I need Jonathan Glasner." What? I don't write these speeches myself.
Just give out those speeches for free?
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
I need some payment here. But no, I think my favorite things are, I've never done my own stunts before. I didn't even think I could do my own stunts, and I get to do my own stunts on this show. And I don't know, Jonathan Glasner always teases, he's like, "I turned you into an action star. Thank me later." And I'm like, am I an action star? But I really love it. So I think that kind of has been the most rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Dean, you and Mr. Glasner, I mean, already knew a thing or two about creating hit sci-fi entertainment. I mean,
Just a little bit, right?
Just a little bit.
Just a little.
And of course, there's one series that has bonded you guys over the years. But what did you take from your respective experiences on your work on Stargate that you brought to this, do you think?
Well, I worked on the feature.
Yeah.
I wasn't involved in the series. That was really what Jonathan did. And
right.
on the feature, we were world building. Mm-hmm. And what I learned from Jonathan is once that world is built, how far you can take it. Mm-hmm. And then Jonathan and I worked together on a show called The Outpost. And that was my first serialized show. I had only done episodic up till then. And he really kind of educated me on what you can do with setting up expectations and then twisting them and then going in surprising areas. Mm-hmm. He's kind of a master at that. So after I wrote the pilot of The Ark, I called him up and I said, "Let's team up on this, because I think we can kind of do what we did with Stargate. I built the world, now you go run with it and make it crazy."
And you talked about, you referred to your initial influences, and obviously there's one for a series like this that just sticks out. I mean, how much is Star Trek in the back of your minds when you work on a show like this?
Well, it's right at the front. I mean, I was a little boy at the time, but my mom was a guest star on the original Star Trek.
Oh, yeah?
In the Wolf in the Fold episode, she plays the princess who gets murdered by Scotty. And that was the drug that kicked in a lifelong addiction. But I grew up, loving a certain kind of show, Doctor Who, the original Star Trek, the Next Generation Star Trek, and there was a great deal of humor to those shows, and they were all character based, really. And then as we've evolved with science fiction, with technology and understanding science better, we've had these very grounded shows, these very dark and edgy shows, but I was kind of missing the ones that made me fall in love with it. And so Jonathan and I said, let's write a love letter to those shows.
There is a bomb dropped about Sharon in season 1. I think we can talk season 1 spoilers, right?
Sure.
We won't spoil season 2, but
of course,
we find out she's a clone, and it's a big bomb
I love how we're
drop.
whispering that like it's a bad thing.
Yes.
She's a clone.
She's a clone.
She's a clone, guys.
Obviously, you knew that well in advance. How did that inform how you approach the character?
That was the beginning for me, and finding Sharon Garnett. There's this, me and my acting coach always reference, this is so obscured, but I'm gonna tell you it. There's this YouTube video of these monkeys, these apes, finally being released out of their cage, because they've been basically like laboratory monkeys, basically. They do a lot of tests on them, which is similar to Garnett. And there's this beautiful video of them finally getting to see grass. And even though it's still in an enclosure, that they get to live a life. And that was kind of the seeds of Garnett for me. I think the clone aspect is at the core of her, really. And was really fun to dive into, because obviously I'm not a clone. And so, that I know
that we know
Mom,
of,
Dad,
real life plot twist.
Yeah, wait a second. But yeah, I think that was the beginning of her, and just like learning more about tardigrade DNA, which was like this thesis Jonathan Glasner had read randomly like on the deep dark web, and then 2 years later, going into season 2, we find out is a real thing that like actually works. So yeah, I think that was like the beginnings of her, but also emotionally, there's so much to like work with on that, you know, so many bigger themes that I think as humans we can relate to, which is this idea of feeling isolated and alone and being by yourself, which I think Garnett really feels. Feeling less than human, I think, is a very relatable topic, which is what's so great about sci-fi in general. It's they take these huge ideas that we all can relate to and find a really secretive way of kind of sending that message through to the audience.
Yeah, all the best sci-fi
Totally.
has messages in the medium.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, speaking of, like, how close do you guys think this series comes? It's set 100 years in the future. How predictive is it? You know, when it comes to the state of the Earth, hopefully it's not that bad we have to flee it.
Well,
Space
Dean?
travel, the existence of human clones like Garnett. You know, how close is...
Don't tell my secrets. Don't tell my secrets. Well, Dean, I don't know if you know this, is a wizard, and he can predict the future, weirdly.
Yeah.
And so it's all based in truth because he's gone to the future. No, I'm just kidding. I was like, how far can I go with this before he stops me?
I think that the show is a what if.
Right.
You know, we live in a world right now where multiple billionaires have their own private space programs. And so this is a contemplation of, well, what's the extent of that? How many more billionaires are going to have their space programs? And what happens when there are no government-run space programs? What if there are no more regulations on how you build it for safety? Or, you know, what if it's just to the specifications of billionaires? And what would that look like in 100 years from now? And I hope that's not our future. I hope we don't have oligarchs running the world. But if they do, it'll look like the Ark.
Yeah, was William Trust based on Jeff Bezos, or do they just is it a coincidence that they bear an uncanny resemblance?
I'm sorry, what?
I would say there's elements of Bezos, there's elements of Elon Musk, there's elements of Richard Branson, but it's a fantasy character because to me, this would be, you know, kind of like on our show, we say the third generation clones are crazy. You know, so this would be like the 10th generation billionaires who control space. You know, to me, it would just get worse over time.
Right. But there is that cautionary tale element to the series for
As
sure.
well as an audition for Elon Musk to be hired on one of his spaceships. I'd really, so if he could just watch the show and then just call my agent, who was the only one clapping in the room, that would be great.
They just shoot him off into space. And
Just let him know I'm ready. And I am the captain now.
Dean, you've brought us so many entertaining movies, television shows over the years. Are you working on anything else, or is it all Ark right now?
Oh, it's been crazy. While we were shooting this, we were also shooting the new season of Leverage Redemption. And the day this crew wrapped on the Ark, they started another show for me called The Librarians, The Next Chapter. So that crew, this amazing crew in Serbia, worked a year straight between the two shows.
Wow.
So yeah, there's been a lot going on.
Feel like they just drink rakia and smoke cigarettes, and that's their fuel.
Yeah.
And they're 7'8".
Yeah, they're like
giants.
they're giants and maybe clones.
Do you think you'll ever round out the Independence Day trilogy, or has that spaceship sailed?
Oh wow.
You know, I don't know. I think the sequel did not go the way we had hoped. I would love a chance at a third shot, but you know, now that property is owned by Disney. I don't know what Disney wants to do with it. So I feel very distant from it. But you know, it's my first child, so you know, you always have special feelings about your first child.
Yeah. Christy, I have to ask you this because I've got a couple Twihards at home. But prior to the Ark,
Yes.
one of your most famous roles, it may have been
I was in it for 30 seconds, but
brief.
yes.
It may have been somewhat brief, but it
Like,
was
literally, if you
but it
went
was
like
also
that,
kind
you
of
missed me.
iconic at the
Thank
same
you.
time. You were
Thank
growing up
you.
Renesmee Cohen in the last Twilight movie. What was that, even though it was such a brief appearance, it was very buzzy at the same time. What
Yeah.
was that like arc like in your career at that time? Because that was kind of
Insane.
That was a buzzed about character, and that franchise was basically at a fever pitch at that time.
Yeah, and my dad, he builds sets for movies, and he built a majority of the sets on
No way.
Twilight. So like, I felt like all in one job. I was like accomplishing everything I've ever wanted to accomplish in one job. And I was like, this is like my second job ever. I was like, what? This is insane. That show was pretty wild. I got fired 3 times, so it was a pretty wild experience.
got fired 3
Because
times?
it got leaked that I booked the part, which I didn't leak, so then they rehired me, and then something or rather, I don't know, showbiz, baby. That's what happens. I feel like, you can't call yourself an actor unless you've been fired 3 times from a
For
show.
the same role.
So
That's
like,
amazing.
I'll never forget it, getting the call on like a Sunday being like, we need you in Squamish. And I like didn't have a driver's license. So my mom and my sister drove me, and we all were like fans of the show. My dad's building the sets, and I'm just like, I'm here to play Renesmee. Don't fire me. Like, it was traumatizing.
Yeah.
Like now every show I ever book, I'm like, they're gonna fire me. Like they're gonna fire me at any moment. But like on a fan basis, it's the first thing people recognize me from. And what a crazy franchise to be a part of with such incredible actors. Like Robert Pattinson is one of my favorite actors. And Kristen Stewart and all those guys. Like, it was wild. It honestly was like a shock to the system, and I think I'm still in therapy to process the whole experience.
It sounds like it taught you some perseverance too.
It taught me like, it actually doesn't matter what you book or what you do. It just matters who you are as a human being. And I never want to lose sight of that. Like, I always want to feel like me, regardless of like the job I book or the popularity of a job I book. I always want to feel like myself and be a human.
Or a clone.
Or a clone. But yeah, I think, it taught me perseverance and like to have a thick skin, because like just because they fired me 3 times doesn't mean that I'm terrible. Or maybe it does.
Are you still in touch with mom and dad, Rob and Kristen?
I wish. I mean, like, look at their amazing careers after
They're
that movie.
both
Like,
killing it, yeah.
what? Like, they're such incredible actors. I love so many of their movies. I study so many of them just because I think they're so incredible.
Which ones didn't you?
Which ones
Didn't you love?
Well, where do I begin,
Dean
guys?
coming with the hard-hitting questions over here. Hand it
For
off.
me, I felt like no, I'm just kidding. I don't want to be fired on any show that I ever book ever again.
Been there, done that.
But yeah, I don't keep in contact with them. I think honestly because I was like, hi guys,
Yeah.
bye guys.
Yeah.
But I hope one day I
Your
get to work
your
with
paths
them.
will cross
I
again.
hope so.
I'm
I
sure.
really hope so.
I'm sure.
Yeah.